There's two types of people. One type of person, if they don't have a system, they need to be intentional about trying and then adjusting what works and what doesn't. But then another kind of person who goes into a business, if they have a system and it's working, don't try to reinvent the wheel, because a lot of times there's been a lot of money and time and effort invested into a script and psychology and a presentation that allows us as a new person coming into a system to move a client through the process and being able to close without actually knowing what's happening.
This is the Just Real Quick podcast, where we discuss how to succeed in the world of sales through confidence, discipline, and consistency. Are you ready to be intentional about creating more opportunities that lead to sales? Tune into this episode right now for the latest insights and strategies that will take your sales game to the next level. I'm your host, Jefferson K. Rogers.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Just Real Quick. I got my partner in crime with me today, Jeffrey Fieldstad. And not a lot of people know that, like, we were at one point really partners in crime.
Yep, for sure. Depending on the day.
Many years ago, me and Jeff grew up together here in St. George, Utah. We've been through a lot together, a lot separately, both in our separate businesses. I'm excited. Me and Jeffrey have been working together now for the last couple of months. And today we're going to be talking about something that has been a part of both of our businesses and part of both of our success path, and that is strategy in the sales process.
Yeah.
So early on for me, I didn't have a ton of sales strategy. It was just winging it a little bit. I had a little bit of a process, and I knew what worked and was delivering results, and I just went out there and did it consistently.
How did you get started on that? Did you have somebody who had someone that had given you any guidance, or did you watch somebody, or because you got started into sales, and then obviously you had something that worked and you were able to duplicate into an incredible business. So
and that was
how did that start?
over a period of time.
Yeah.
I broke it down and turned it into a duplicatable process that, for me, I've got a certain level of talent and confidence that isn't common among everybody.
Right.
So, I was trying to develop a process that was going to be duplicatable for anybody, from any background. Yeah. I wanted to have a place where people could come in and have success, whether they were working at a restaurant or they were coming from construction or a mechanic, like I was at the time when I started working in door-to-door sales. And the process that I started in, I did have some mentors and I had some coaches. I had these guys that were having some success, which helped me build some belief in my own abilities and what the opportunity was. But there was no process. There wasn't a whole lot of coaching or mentorship. They just essentially gave me a script and said, good luck, buddy. Like, let us know when you got your first appointment set up. This is really easy.
Yeah.
And I was able to do that.
Yep.
But it's not likely that most people are going to have that same type of initiative, and they're going to take something and go through an incredible amount of rejection and failure to be able to push through. So I wanted to create a process and a coaching and mentorship that would take anybody and be able to lead them to success. And I think that you did something similar to that in your business.
Yeah, I tried, because I think the thing I love about sales is it doesn't take this specific talent or personality or skill set like in some careers. Colton and I were talking about maybe architecture before this. If you're going to go become an architect, or you're going to go become a doctor or an engineer, it does take some very certain skills required to be successful in that business, right? Like if you're going to be an architect, you have to be an artist, but you also have to understand a lot of things. Versus if you're going to be in sales, it's just talking. It's just asking the right questions, knowing when to ask them, how to present an offer. And if you do those things, you can be successful regardless of what your personality trait is. And so I think, when you talk about just getting started into sales and learning, I think there's two types of people. One type of person, if they don't have a system, they need to be intentional about trying and then adjusting what works and what doesn't. But then another kind of person who goes into a business, if they have a system and it's working, don't try to reinvent the wheel, because a lot of times there's been a lot of money and time and effort invested into a script and psychology and a presentation that allows us as a new person coming into a system to move a client through the process and being able to close without actually knowing what's happening. You just learned a script, right?
So how often did you see that in your business where somebody came in and they maybe had a little experience, or they were just overly confident and they were trying to recreate a process that you knew was already duplicatable and working?
Yeah, I had both sides. So I had, sometimes people would come in and they had all this confidence and they would try to reinvent the wheel, and then they weren't getting the results. Somebody who had no experience prior, but they just followed the system, and then they were beating this person who had a lot of experience, right? And they're like, why is this person doing better than me? They have no experience in sales. And it's like, well, you're trying to reinvent the wheel and you're trying to do things differently, where if you would just follow the process and follow the system, then you would be getting probably better results because you do have some experience. You can read body language. You know when to ask the right questions. And then I had a lot of people who would come in who had no experience. And I loved working with these people that had no experience, and they just were coachable. And then they would just learn the script, learn when to ask the questions. And a lot of times they would start getting success, and then they would be more bought into the system because it worked for them. And so maybe they were waiting tables before or whatever it may be, but they were coming in, they would have success, and they would go, oh my gosh, it's working. So I'm just going to totally buy into this system. And then they became cheerleaders for the system, which helped it even more because then it reinforced those beliefs into the organization.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so interesting how universal that concept is. Because some people have a hard time with it, and we've had a lot of people come through JKR Windows that same type of thing, both sides of the spectrum.
Yep.
Zero experience, totally coachable, open, they want to win. And because we had a process they could buy into, they followed it, and they were seeing other people see success. Why do you think people have such a hard time with, and I'm not saying everybody, but there's a majority of people, especially in leadership and even other business owners, that have a hard time buying into a script. And they're talking about, like, we're just so proud of all the bullet points. We're just trying to hit these major touch points throughout the process, and we just leave it up to the salesperson to be creative.
Yeah, I think that's the reason why most people have a challenge with that is because they've never actually thought about duplicating their abilities into other people. A lot of times when you see people that are like that, is like they've led their business with charisma. I always said it was a personality-driven business, and a personality-driven business is hard to duplicate. It's also hard to attract people with other talents and skills than you, which becomes hard to scale a business. Because if you can only attract one kind of person, then you're missing out on all these other incredible abilities that probably you don't have, and you're not attracting them because it's all personality driven, and you're only attracting people that like your personality. Versus the kind of person who's had some leadership experience, and they realize that, hey, these different personality traits, these different types actually, they're a benefit to me because they provide skill sets and they provide better experience in areas where I might have a shortfall. And so surrounding myself with those kind of people make me better, and they make me look better than I really am, simply because I've had the willingness to surround myself with people that had different talents and skills. And I think that happens because you have a system that anybody can plug into. And so a lot of times you'll see different leaders with all different personality types, but they get a similar result because they understand that what they're trying to do is duplicate this process into other people rather than trying to get other people to act like them, which is a personality-driven business.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen it in so many different industries, so many different companies. I've been around the door-to-door industry a lot of years now. And there's this, the difference between a high performer and somebody that's got it figured out and they can do it at a high level, and somebody like our Joel, which he came in as one of those people who had experience working for another company, and the leadership previously had given them a lot of creative freedom to go and create their own process.
Right.
Like, here's the bullet points we want you to hit, and you've got the freedom to be able to make it make sense.
Right.
And he was one of those people that could make it make sense.
Yep.
And so when he came in here, there was this conflicting kind of paradigm shift that he had to go through, because first of all, he's trying to learn JKR Windows and why we've been successful and our leadership structure. And then as he got more experience and started to get into the mentorship and training and coaching and developing other people from all different walks of life and experience levels, he started to realize that, if I go out there and show people my way of doing it, the results were so mixed.
Yeah.
And people were getting blown out of the water because they're trying to do this thing that's not duplicatable when we've got this system right in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a script, we got expectations, we got all of these activities that we can do to do role play and help you to overcome objections are right there.
Yeah.
And some people don't need it.
Right.
But one of the things that I love that you say that I think comes from a lot of experience going through these same types of things is we build the process for the 95%.
Yep.
Not for the 5%.
Exactly.
Those 5% are going to figure it out regardless.
Exactly. Yeah.
And a lot of times they're going to fight you tooth and nail on that process.
Yep.
But they have success. So sometimes they get a little bit of leeway.
Yep.
But we're not trying to build a duplicatable process for 5%.
Right.
Otherwise, we're going to be spinning our wheels forever.
Yes.
So the topic of the podcast today is building effective sales strategies, not for you to become a better top performer. It's for you to build a team and to have something that's duplicatable. You know, I don't know about you or anybody else listening to this thing, but I didn't want to have to be the only guy and have to go do it all by myself. I wanted to offer an opportunity for my team and for future leaders of the company to have something to plug into and build themselves a team as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because a lot of times there are high performers and they go, well, I'm making whatever it is, $500,000 a year by myself, and I don't need a team. And I think that's great. And I would encourage people, if you're going to build a team, you do need to become very, very good at your system and your process so that you can duplicate it into others. It's like if you make a copy of a bad copy, it just gets worse and worse and worse over time. So the more clear the original copy is, the better it is, the better the duplication of that copy is going to be, right? And so I think it's important to become as good as we can at this process and be a high performer at the process that we've been taught. And so sometimes I would have people come to me and they would get this weird objection. And I would automatically know that they're saying something off script because I go,
that's causing it.
Yes, what we teach you to say doesn't yield that objection. So you're getting this objection. So I already know you're saying something wrong. So let's go back to your script and let's go over it. Before I teach you how to overcome that objection, let's go back to the script, because there should be this list of objections that you're getting that we know are going to come up because it's just human nature. So if you're getting something different, then let's go back to the script. And then once they've mastered this script, then we also know that it's going to yield certain objections, and then we can teach how to overcome those objections, and then it makes the results predictable. And I think the important thing is you become a high performer at this system, and you can duplicate it into others, and then you can leverage and scale. And that's not everybody's goal, but it should be. And I think even if you're a high performer by yourself, whatever company you're at, the owner of that business always appreciates and respects somebody who edifies the system that they're trying to run so that they can scale their business as well. Going back to the technology and using technology for sales and those process, I think it's very important that you use technology as a reminder, but it's not going to build actual relationships. And I've always said, I believe people do business with people they like and trust. And you don't trust technology. So the technology is used as reminders, so it might be, hey, a birthday. So you can use technology to send out even a postcard to somebody or a letter or an email or a text message just to remind them, hey, I care about you and I'm thinking about you. But what goes even further is a phone call and them hearing your voice, right? So when you're building a relationship with somebody, so if this is with a salesperson on your team, then you can use that. If it's building it with a client, then if you've had a past client, it keeps people talking great about your business. And then when they see you and that communication happens, it raises that level of trust. So I think technology can be used a lot of different ways. It can be used for CRM services like customer relationship management, whether it's birthdays or reminders or systems or whatever you want to, whatever KPIs inside of your business that you can move onto a piece of technology, and it makes sense to get off somebody's plate so it can free them up to do the things that matter, right? But then there are also things that when it frees up that time, that salesperson or anybody talking to actual customer or the teammate or whatever it may be, it frees them up to actually do the things that build trust, right? And those things that build trust are the biggest impactors of business or revenue, you know, where if people see your brand everywhere, there still has to be somebody to show up and go close the sale. It's not going to close itself. You know, a lot of times technology will help you get the client to remember or remind themselves or a brand, but it still isn't going to help them take action. You've got to have that person there to take action. So I think technology has made business far better, but it doesn't mean it's easier. And I've always said that just as things get better, doesn't mean it's easier. You still got to put in the same work. It just allows you to do things better. And what I mean by that is I always use the example of Ben Hogan in the early days of golf. It had made $300,000 winning 64 championships, I think it was. And then by the time Tiger Woods had won 64 championships, he had made $100 million. So you go from a few hundred thousand to $100 million. It's the same sport, but the sport has gotten better. But it doesn't mean it was easier for Tiger Woods to win those championships than it was to Ben Hogan.
Yeah.
Right? And so what has changed? Well, there's a lot changed in that sport, like technology and how many eyeballs are seeing it and how much revenue is that business has the ability to generate. And so those things are the same in business. So you should use technology, but you always have to remember the sport of business, or actually closing sales and overcoming objections and moving that client through the process and helping them make that decision. It's not easier. It's just better. You're just going to make more money because of it.
Yeah, I think one of the things I was thinking of as you were talking about that is the ability to listen to an interaction. We were talking about something earlier, and you're talking about this objection that's coming up, and it was created by something. There's a process that we follow, and we know that if you step outside of that process, these objections that you're getting are going to happen.
Yep.
And we've got a tool that we call Zero, where we can, you know, the sales guys and our coordinators are running this technology while they're in the process of doing their pitch. And then if these objections are coming up, let's listen back to it, because there's something that you're saying that's causing this.
Mm-hmm.
And as part of the accountability and the expectations of our process, and for anybody that's listening to this, there has to be some standards.
Yeah. Yep.
And a great way to do that, it's some extra cost that's involved, and there's some extra work that's involved for leadership. But if you want to have a high standard and you want to have some consistency with your results, having some of these tools to hold your people accountable to the process is so important. Did you guys have anything like that where you could actually physically go back and listen to see it?
We actually taught, I mean, it wasn't that long ago, but when I started my business in 2006, none of this technology actually existed. So we would use little MP3 recorders. So we would actually record ourselves. And then eventually it became the iPhone, and there was really no technology, but you could record it. And yeah, we would teach people to do those things. Mm-hmm. And hey, record it so you can go back and listen to yourself. Because sometimes in your pitch, you'll start adding or you add these filler words where you're trying to think about what you're going to say next before you're really good at the script, and they sound unsure to the client. And so you're creating doubt. And it might be as simple as stop saying or these filler words that we use. So if we can go back and listen. So I think that technology is really good, but it also, I think, creates an expectation that people are going to follow the system, because at any point there could be accountability of what are you saying and are you following the system. Mm-hmm. And I just wrote down on my notes here that I think leadership rises and falls on expectations. And so if you have an expectation of, hey, we have a system, which is important to have, especially if you're going to duplicate yourself, right? We have a system. We expect that you follow the system, and we expect that you continuously get better and improve in that system, right? We don't expect it to be perfect, but we do expect you to progress. We do expect you to get better. And so I think as that happens in leadership, tools like Zero, right, allow the leaders to go back and go, hey, they're not closing like they used to, or something's happening, and you can go back and figure out, what is it? Did you change? I know for myself, I would record myself doing the presentation, and I would go, oh, I added that in. And sometimes this happens. Maybe you got a random objection that happens 1 out of 100 times.
And you're sometimes doing it unconsciously.
Yes.
Just from previous experiences.
So you added something into your presentation because 1 out of 100 said something. You're like, oh, shoot. So then your next presentation, you added that sentence into your presentation to overcome an objection that you actually only get 1 out of 100 times, which shouldn't be part of the system because it's really not effective. And then you do that enough times, and 6 months later, your presentation is totally different, and you're way off base, and you're not getting the results you used to get, and you don't know why, but now you can go back and listen to it. So, yeah, I think that's why that's an area where technology is incredible because it can make you efficient with your time. And it can give you confidence, like, oh, that's where I messed up, you know?
Yeah, these are all important components in a sales strategy. You got to have a process, first of all.
Yep.
And scripts, I believe in scripts because it makes things duplicatable, especially if you're building a company like I'm trying to build, where we're bringing in people. Like I was just texting a guy that works at the local restaurant and has very little sales experience, but he's great with people.
Yeah.
And he's scared to death of making a change, even though his life is in shambles right now. But we've got a process, and I'm 100% confident with that guy's abilities and his charisma and as much as he cares about people that we could plug him into this system.
Yeah.
And it's almost guaranteed success with a couple of variables because he also has to buy in and be here fully committed. But then just as important is you got to have the accountability to that process. And if you've got too much leeway for people to go out there and do their own thing, I experienced this with the previous companies that I was working for, is there wasn't a ton of accountability. And it would get so far down the path and somebody's just completely shit in the bed before anything is done. And it's way more reactive than it's proactive to stay on top of it because they were lacking accountability. And then people were getting blown out of the water left and right. And that's the last thing that I want in my company is it gets so far that people are leaving before we get a chance to help them. So with the zeros, with, watching the numbers really closely and having data that we're paying attention to, and we know our averages and we know what is a reasonable range for somebody to be in, that as soon as things go outside of that, we're proactive and we're paying attention to it. So these are all things to model. If you don't have a process like this, they're all things that you can do to model it after a successful process. With something duplicatable, there's accountability, there's tools and technology that you can use now to help you with all of these things.
Yeah, I think it's important for anybody listening to this to remember also that the law of averages, which is what we're talking about, the law of averages and working the numbers only applies with the law of large numbers. So you have to be willing to do enough numbers to know what the averages are to actually get a good average. And a lot of people are trying to work these law of averages without working large numbers. And so I've always said in business and sales, the thing that I love about it is you can provide guarantees. Like I said, I can guarantee you're going to make X number of sales if you do X number of calls, X number of appointments, right? Whatever your sales process is, I can guarantee this is the result you're going to get. The only thing I can't guarantee is that you're willing to do that work. So the real variable is your effort. So I can't guarantee that, but as long as you're willing to do the effort to do this, here are the numbers, right? And I can guarantee that if you do this number, this will be the result. And so that's an important thing, I think, with sales to remember, that when we're talking about ratios and your numbers about how many calls you need to make, to how many appointments you book, to how many appointments actually run, to how many sales you close, those are all ratios and those are averages. But the law of averages only works with the law of large numbers. And so while one person might have better averages, we know if we take a large group of people, we're going to have better averages. I've always said it like this. If you look at a publicly traded company right now, there's analysts that'll go look at the earnings of companies and even sales companies, and they'll predict the profitability of these companies within pennies. But yet those same salespeople inside of that company think that they can't predict their results. But it's because they don't actually pay attention to these things you're talking about, these averages. So we can take a guy like you were just talking about and say plug into the system regardless of your experience in the past. if you work these numbers, this will be your result. And if you want that result, you're willing to work the numbers, then it's game over, you know?
Yep. Yeah, if only it was that easy to just put things into perspective and get everybody to see that picture.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's why. Yeah, I mean, if it is, I mean, it really is, but it all comes back to desire. You know, I've always said the one thing you can't teach somebody is desire. If they show up with the desire, everything's not going to work out perfectly. Everything's not going to go the way they want it to go. And you know, we were talking about this earlier. It's like if you have a destination and you put it into the map, and there's 3 different routes to get there, and one of those, you know, roads gets shut down, there's still 2 other ways to get to the same destination, and you just have to be willing to go the other way. What has to be important to you is the result. So you might have to adjust on the way. And the thing we can't train into somebody is the willpower and their desire to actually achieve that destination. That's the hard part. That's the real variable, I think, with sales, is do you really want to accomplish a goal or not? Like, if you want to accomplish a goal, who cares what happened in the process? Get to the goal, you know? And to me, that's what I think separates somebody who wins big versus somebody who doesn't in anything. This could be sports, this could be sales, this could be business. And it never goes the way you planned originally, almost never.
Yeah.
You're not going to map it out and go, yeah, this is how we ideally, but winning isn't logical. It's just not. If it was, everybody would win, you know?
Yeah, there's a lot of very intelligent people that I know and that I'm close to that are successful in their own right, but there's, you know, one of the things that we were talking about here is having a plan.
Mm-hmm.
And having a plan is important to a point, but there's a reason why so few businesses are successful.
Yeah.
It's not because they didn't have a plan.
Right.
It's because, well, for one, they underestimated the amount of activity that was going to be necessary for them to succeed.
Yep.
And you got to go out there and sell, and you got to be consistent. But it's not like there's 95% of businesses were bad ideas.
Right.
It's like there's a lot of great ideas and great businesses.
Yep.
The difference is if you have a plan, you have to come to terms with that plan is going to evolve. It's going to adapt. And you've got to just be open to things, you know, a lot of times not looking anything like what you thought they were going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
If I got caught up on my plan and what I thought was going to happen, we wouldn't be where we're at right now.
Right.
And if you're watching this and you've got a sales team and you're trying to build and you're trying to create processes, it's great to have a plan. But just know that years from now, you'll look back and you'll find the same thing that I found, that it actually didn't turn out anything like what you thought it would turn out like.
And probably if you have the willpower, you have the discipline, and you are focused on results, it'll probably turn out better than you imagined. Right? Because your belief level grows too as the plan evolves.
I mean, it's way better than I ever thought it could be.
Yeah.
But it was nothing like I thought it would be.
Exactly.
Because I just consistently took action. And I'm putting plans, new plans, and okay with the little failures along the way because there was a lot of lessons that came with them. And it really did. It turned out way better than I ever had imagined.
Yeah. You know what I think is a good analogy on this topic is raising children. Is like before you have kids and you see other people's kids act a certain way, you're like, when I have kids, my kids are never going to do that. And then you have kids and you're like, yeah, I get why that happened, you know? And you start realizing why certain things happen, and it just changes your perspective. And so a lot of times before you've had success in business, and it's like, I have to stick to this plan. This is the way it's going to be. This is how it should be. And you're stuck on that versus realizing there are going to be variables, such if you have kids, personalities, and all these different things you really can't control. And as you move forward and as you become a parent, your perspective of being a parent changes dramatically because no matter how hard you try, you're not going to change that individual person, right? And so the same thing is with a plan. It's like no matter how hard you try, there are so many variables in the world, the economy, cost of goods, whatever it may be. You just can't control certain things, and you have to be willing to evolve your plan in order to fit those variables. But the one thing you have to be focused on is that result. And so there are going to be times where you have to put in more effort than you thought. In fact, almost always. And I think, you just alluded to this, but I think the number one reason people don't succeed isn't because they don't have a good plan. It's not because they don't have a good idea. It's not because of anything other than they simply just didn't do enough in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
And if they're willing to do that, then odds are that they're going to be more successful than they thought, because very few people ever really do more than enough. Most people do just enough to get by.
Yeah, and you've got the ability to compress time
Mm-hmm.
with a massive amount of activity. When I started my business, it was just me, and I had to do everything.
Yep.
But I was working 16 to 18 hours a day for 2 years straight.
Yep.
So there was a lot that I learned the hard way. A lot of it was the hard way because I wasn't really using coaches and mentors at that point. But I compressed time.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot, and I made a lot of mistakes. And a lot of them were, they were with people, and I blew a lot of people out of the water. I handled situations terribly. But I was paying attention to those things. And because I compressed time and I was so intentional about the outcomes and getting better for the next outcome, both with my training, the new processes, the outcomes I was trying to get with my customers, with my own time and delegating things and training and developing people, all of that time that I put in was so worth it.
Yeah.
And it was time away from other things, which is just inevitable with anything in life. If you're spending time on this and you're spending an exuberant amount of time, you're going to be taking time away from something else.
Yeah. Well, I think, when you talk about that, you're working 16, 18-hour days, you made decisions that weren't the best. And, I same thing. I've done the same thing. I look back and go, man, I should have handled this situation differently. I should have said this instead of that. And I think that all comes from a desire to get better. I think a lot of the problem is people try to avoid those situations. They try to say, oh, I'm going to get better without having those challenges. And you're just not. That's why the saying is that when the student's ready, the teacher appears. Because until you have that challenge, you don't even know that you're going to have that challenge. And so you have to just be willing to make the mistake and willing to not be very good at something until you enter that situation and go, oh, I handled it wrong. This is how I should have handled it. And then next time, handle it differently. But if you're not willing to have those mistakes, if you're not willing to fail forward, if you're not willing to go through those challenges, then you're never going to become the person you need to become to handle a situation. Like for me, a lot of times early on, it was like people would say something or they would just piss me off and I would tell them, and it was like, I learned later on is like, maybe I was getting mad because of the way I was seeing it. And I didn't have enough empathy by looking at it from their perspective and being able to influence them. But I can't influence somebody I'm mad or yelling at or frustrated with. I have to be able to put myself in their shoes and go, oh, okay, here's how they're seeing it. I understand. Let me help you adjust and seeing it from their perspective. But it takes a lot of experience to be able to get there. And you're going to mess up far more than you're going to do it right before you ever get good at something like that.
Yeah, I think that's something that, out of the 95% of businesses that fail, there's so many different factors. The activity obviously is one of them.
Yep.
It takes a lot of work. Like business is not for everybody.
Right.
And there's a reason why there's so few people succeed and there are so few entrepreneurs and it's such a sexy thing. Because it looks like it's flashy and it's incredible and it seems easy.
Because of Instagram.
Yeah,
it wasn't for
always
social
like that.
media, yeah.
It wasn't always like that.
Yeah.
But it's difficult. There's a lot of work that goes into it. And there's this willingness that entrepreneurs have to fail and to fail often and to just come to terms with it, because that's where all the growth comes from. All the discomfort, all the uncertainty, all the failures, all the people that I didn't treat well. I learned from each one of those things because, man, I sure didn't want to make anybody feel like that ever again.
Right.
And sometimes it didn't sink in right away, and I had to go through small variations of the same shit over and over and over to get the repetitions in, because there's no amount of preparation that you can do as a leader ahead of time to avoid those situations.
Exactly. Yeah, nobody's going to tell you something prior to it happening. There's too many variables for someone to prepare you for that exact situation to happen and you be ready for it. You just have to go through it. right? You've got to get better. And I think this is why, whether it's entrepreneurship or sales, which very much are similar, I think the difference between someone who's good at sales and someone who's good at entrepreneurship is duplication. It is teaching other people and how to replicate your systems and processes. But I think this is the reason why a lot of times in sales or entrepreneurship, athletes are really good, because they had to be willing to fail over and over. They had to be willing to suck in front of everybody and then get better and go out and try again and go back to the weight room and go back to the drawing board and get their coach and get feedback and be willing to have this talk with themselves and with others. Like, how many times do you give somebody feedback and in your career, I'm sure a lot, where you want to give them constructive criticism and they just take it as like an attack. Well, a lot of athletes, they know that that's part of the sport. It's like, hey, I could have done this. I could have done this. And it was never an attack. It was always a desire for progress. And so if somebody goes into a situation with a desire for progress and you did something wrong and someone points it out, it's like, hey, I'm not trying to attack you. I'm just trying to help you get better results. And I really think that's what separates athletes and why they usually do so good in sales and entrepreneurship, is because they understood that concept. Hey, you messed up here. Here's how you get better, and here's how you avoid it in the future. Versus a lot of employees go, oh, they're just attacking me. But this is who I am. Well, yeah, and that's going to be who you are forever, which is why you've been where you're at forever. So if you want to change, you got to change.
And that's the importance of being coachable. When I first got introduced to the sales game, that was one of the initial concepts that stuck with me, that I felt like some people have naturally and some people it takes longer and some people just don't have it.
Right.
Is being coachable. And I know that you use that that phrase a lot in your business.
Absolutely.
And then as it relates to that, when we're talking about making mistakes and having to go through repetitions and learning from those things, there's so much value there.
Yeah.
But then there's like the concept of mentorship and using advisors and consultants, because there's people that have gone through some of these challenges that you're going to go through as a salesperson or as a business owner.
Yeah.
And what I think it did for me was I still had to learn all those things the hard way. But it prepared me to recognize them when they were coming up and to be a little bit more aware. Because I have spent a lot of money on coaches and mentors and advisors and consultants and workshops. And I mean, ridiculous amount of time spent trying to learn from other people's mistakes.
Yeah.
But I still had to learn all that shit.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the beauty of having a coach and having a mentor and having someone to help you is not necessarily, they're not going to help you avoid the mistake per se, rather than the amount of time it takes you to bounce back from that mistake. So it's like, how do I respond to this? Okay, I made this choice and maybe it wasn't the best, but I didn't know I should have made it different until I made the mistake. And so now what is the right choice to make to get back on track? And I think that bounce back time is the beauty of a mentor and a coach that a lot of people don't see. It's a lot of times a coach isn't going to help you avoid the mistake. If you're an athlete and you're a receiver and you miss the pass, well, they didn't know you were going to miss the pass until it happened. But then once you miss the pass, they go, hey, if you would have done this, this, and this, next time you'll make the catch. And so the same thing is in business. It's like, all right, what is that bounce back time and how do I adjust so I can quickly get back on track and then continue to progress? That's the beauty of a mentor, a coach, is somebody helping you to get back on track fast and move forward.
Love that. So as we're wrapping up here, you guys, sales strategy is important. If you're trying to develop a team, you're trying to build a company, having a sales strategy is going to be important for you to be able to duplicate and grow and scale. And there's all these buzzwords in business, but the key is here to keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate. Don't overthink. Those overthinkers that I know that are some of the most intelligent people on this planet, they have a hard time ever getting around to do anything. So if you're of average intelligence and you can come up with a plan, I suggest that you just execute. Take massive action in the direction of what those goals are. Be open to that plan changing over time. And if you're a salesperson, you're looking for a company to get involved with, a company without a process. If you're diligent like I am, and I wanted to win, I made sense of a company that didn't have much of a process. But here at JKR Windows, we have a process. I've learned from a lot of those mistakes, and I wanted to create something here that people could be a part of, that they could thrive in, no matter where they're coming from or what their background. We have got a process that we can plug people into and they can see success. It's almost guaranteed as long as you have the desire to succeed and to change your life. Thank you guys so much for checking in to another episode of Just Real Quick. We're going to keep coming back every week with more on sales and leadership and communication. My co-host Jeffrey and I are going to keep coming back and adding as much value as humanly possible. We're going to bring in some fantastic guests and people from JKR Windows, from outside of the company. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the podcast. Share it with somebody who you think could benefit from this. Share it with somebody who you think is looking for a company like JKR Windows to be a part of, to create a career and a success story for themselves in. Keep coming back every week. Thank you guys for checking in. We'll see you next time.